Hi folks, how are you? Well, I thought I would do us a little bonus video this week. And today we are going to be looking at the story of Dorothea Waddingham. Dorothea basically was a nurse. She run a nursing home. And she ended up not to be a very nice person because as far as I know, she was convicted of murder and a lot of crimes a long time ago. Today's video comes from Well I Never on YouTube, and I will put a link to their channel on this video. So let's have a look at the story of Dorothea Waddingham. So here we go. Let's get it up. Okay, just check the volume. So here we go.
Believed to have been born on a farm near Nottingham on June the 21st, 1899, Dorothea Nancy Marilina Allen Chandler entered a world that would offer her precious little in the way of advantages. While much of her early life was a mystery, what we know for certain is that she left school early and took up work in a factory, as so many working-class young women did in those days. Her first brush with the medical world came when she secured employment at the Burton-on-Trent Workhouse Infirmary in Staffordshire. Bear in mind, this wasn't proper nursing training. She was a ward orderly, picking up bits and pieces of medical knowledge as she went along. But Dorothea was nothing if not ambitious, and she would later pass herself off as a fully qualified nurse, a deception that would prove central to her eventual downfall.
So basically, she went into hospital. She was basically, in my day, it used to be somebody called like an auxiliary nurse, but I think they're just like an HCN worker or something now. She wasn't a fully trained nurse. She basically worked alongside the nursing staff and cleaned up and done bits and pieces, looked after people's care. But again, no medical training whatsoever.
The young woman's character was already showing troubling signs of maladjustment. Some sources claim she had 5 previous convictions for obtaining money by fraud, though the specific details of these early crimes remains lost to history. What's clear is that Dorothea had developed a pattern of living by her wits and bending rules and the truth when it suited her. In 1925, Dorothea married Thomas Willoughby Leach, and for a brief time it seemed her life might take a turn for the better. The couple had 3 children together, Edwin, Alan and Mary, over the course of their 8-year marriage. But fate had other plans. Thomas developed and eventually succumbed to throat cancer in 1933, leaving Dorothea a widow with 3 young mouths to feed and precious little means to do so. It was then that she formed a relationship with Ronald Joseph Sullivan, a man 6 years her senior who had been lodging with the family. Sullivan, it seems, saw something in Dorothea, perhaps her determination or willingness to take risks that more conventional folk might shy away from. Together, they would have 2 more children, bringing Dorothea's total to 5 little ones depending upon her for survival. Faced with such responsibility and limited options, Dorothea reverted to her father's last name of Waddingham and hatched a plan. She and Sullivan would open a nursing home at 32 Devon Drive, Nottingham, with her serving as matron and him as general assistant. The county authorities, taking her at her word regarding her nursing experience, granted their approval. In January 1935, Miss Blagg of the County Nursing Association approached Dorothea with what seemed like a godsend: 2 new patients who would pay 30 shillings a week for their care. The patients, Louisa Bagley, a widow of 89, suffering from senility, and her 50-year-old daughter Ada, who was afflicted with a progressive paralysis that left her unable to walk. Now 30 shillings might not sound like much, but in those days it represented a decent weekly wage.
So basically she got the nursing home opened on the merit that she was maybe pretending again that she had... Yes, she did have history of working in nursing homes, but she wasn't a nurse. But then these two people have came along, and these two people came from a nursing authority. So that would go on her side, because if other people see this happening, they must think that everything would have been okay. So that gives her, as he said, a bonus, you know. Let's carry on.
The problem was, Dorothea soon found herself with only 2 residents after another patient died in February, leaving her with barely enough income to keep her children fed. It was then that a most convenient arrangement was struck. Whether through Dorothea's persuasion or Ada's own initiative, and this question would later prove crucial, Ada decided to change her will. On the 4th of May, she summoned her solicitor, Mr. Lane, and made a bequest that would leave all her savings, some £1,600, to Dorothea and Ronald on the condition that they care for both Louisa and herself for the remainder of their lives.
And in those days, that was a hell of a lot of money.
Had Dorothea threatened to send the women to the workhouse if they couldn't pay their way? The very thought of such an institution would have struck terror into the hearts of the elderly poor. The workhouse represented the ultimate degradation, a place where dignity went to die, along with hope. On Sunday, the 12th of May, just 8 days after Ada had changed her will, the elderly Louisa died of what appeared to be cardiovascular problems. At nearly 90 years of age, her passing raised no eyebrows.
Funny that.
A death certificate was duly issued, and Louisa was laid to rest with little ceremony. Ada lived through the summer of 1935, apparently in good spirits, despite her condition. She received visits from friends, including a Mrs. Briggs, who found her cheerful on Tuesday, the 10th of September. But the very next morning, everything changed dramatically. Dorothea called Dr. Mansfield, Ada's physician, to report that her patient had fallen into a coma. By the time he arrived, Ada had passed away, and Mansfield diagnosed the cause as a cerebral hemorrhage. It was then that Dorothea produced what would later prove to be a most damaging piece of evidence, a letter supposedly written by Ada on the 29th of August, expressing her desire to be cremated and, most unusually, stipulating that her relatives should not be informed of her death. Dr. Mansfield, seeing nothing amiss at the time, issued both a death certificate and a certificate permitting cremation. These 2 certificates, along with Ada's letter, made their way to the crematorium, where they crossed the desk of Nottingham's medical officer for health, Dr. Cyril Banks. Now here was a man with an eye for detail. Indeed, he would ultimately prove Dorothea's undoing. He noticed something peculiar about the letter. The words, "My last wish is that my relatives shall not know of my death," appeared to have been added after the original text was written, cramped into spaces as though inserted as an afterthought. Dr. Banks's suspicions were aroused enough that he ordered a post-mortem examination. The results were shocking. Ada's body contained several grains of morphine, far more than enough to kill. This discovery prompted the exhumation of Louisa's remains, which revealed that she, too, had been poisoned with the same drug. If the cremation had gone through, it is probable that these potential murders would have gone completely undiscovered. Both Dorothea and Ronald Sullivan were arrested and charged with taking Ada Begley's life. Dorothea had recently given birth to her 5th child and was still nursing the infant when she found herself behind bars, a detail that would later fuel protests. The trial began at Nottinghamshire Assizes on the 24th of February 1936, before Mr. Justice Goddard. Norman Burkett led the prosecution, while J.F. Eales defended the pair. Early in proceedings, it became clear that the evidence against Ronald Sullivan was insufficient, and he was discharged on the 2nd day, leaving Dorothea to face the music.
So she was left on her own. There was insufficient evidence, and they let him go. Oh dear.
Alone, despite the fact that it had been he who had written the suspicious cremation letters that had triggered the entire investigation. Dorothea's defense centered on a claim that Dr. Mansfield had provided her with morphine tablets to ease Ada's pain. The good doctor vehemently denied this, though he admitted to prescribing morphine for another patient, Mrs. Kemp, who had died before Ada and her mother. In her testimony, Dorothea painted a picture of Ada's final days as filled with depression and agony, claiming she had administered up to 10 tablets over 2 days to ease her suffering. But here is where Dorothea's story began to unravel. This account, given to the police on the 24th of September, after the post-mortem results were known, contradicted her earlier statement that Ada had enjoyed a hearty lunch on her final Tuesday and seemed quite well. Her performance in the witness box was, by all accounts, unconvincing, and she admitted to disposing of the medicine bottle and glass, hardly the actions of an innocent caregiver. On the third day of the trial, after deliberating for 2 hours and 15 minutes, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. They also added a recommendation for mercy, a not uncommon occurrence on the rare occasion a woman is found guilty of murder. And having recently given birth, it would have been no surprise if her mandatory death sentence was commuted to a lesser punishment. But Mr. Justice Goddard was unmoved by this plea, as was Home Secretary John Simon. Since Nottingham lacked execution facilities, Waddingham was transferred to Birmingham's Winson Green prison, and the date was set for 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th of April 1936. The case had captured public attention, and not all of it was hostile to Dorothea. By Wednesday afternoon, protesters had gathered outside Winson Green, their numbers growing to an estimated 5,000 by the morning of the execution. Led by the noted anti-capital punishment campaigner Mrs. Violet van der Elst, they chanted, "Stop this mother murder," and sang hymns that could be heard within the prison walls. Thomas Pierpoint, assisted by his nephew Albert, and what would become the younger man's first female execution, carried out the sentence. By 8:01 a.m., she was hanging lifeless in the cell below the gallows, and history recorded another execution in Britain's long and often troubling relationship with capital punishment. Here's where the case becomes truly fascinating from a modern perspective.
Okay.
Consider the evidence that pointed away from Dorothea's guilt, or at least suggested the case wasn't as clear-cut as prosecutors claimed. Ronald Sullivan, who wrote the suspicious cremation letter that started the entire investigation, walked free due to insufficient evidence. Yet, if he penned that forged addendum about relatives not being informed, he was complicit in the cover-up, if not the deaths themselves. Some have suggested that Sullivan, being older and more experienced in the ways of deception, might have manipulated Dorothea into the scheme, or even carried out the murders himself while letting her take the blame. After all, he had easy access to the patients and would have known about the morphine prescribed to Mrs. Kemp. Dr. Mansfield admitted to prescribing morphine for another patient in the home. In an establishment with poor record-keeping and multiple people having access to medicines, could there have been confusion or an accident rather than deliberate murder? The forensic science of the 1930s, while advancing at a pace, lacked the precision we take for granted today. The more one examines this case, the more troubling questions emerge.
Oh dear.
Why was Sullivan released when he had clearly participated in creating false documents? Why did...
Absolutely, because he's in the betting, you know what I mean? If not, did he do it himself? You just don't know this. And he just got away with it completely, or did he? I don't know what way it's going to end up, but it sounds as if he did. Maybe because now that he's said it again, maybe if he did do it, did he ever do it again, or what happened,
The authorities proceed with the execution despite the jury's recommendation for mercy. And And why, in a case built largely on circumstantial evidence, was there such haste to see justice done? The case of Ada Bagley's fiancé, who took his own life after her death, adds another layer of tragedy to an already complex story, suggesting that Ada's demise caused genuine grief among those who knew her, supporting the prosecution's narrative that she was a victim rather than someone seeking to end her own suffering. And so we come to the end of our tale, though the questions it raises refuse to rest as quietly as Dorothea herself in the unmarked grave within Winson Green's walls. Was she a calculating killer who murdered vulnerable patients for money? Or was she a desperate mother, driven to tragic extremes by circumstances beyond her control? Perhaps most settling of all was whether she was an innocent woman who paid the ultimate price for crimes committed by another. The truth, as is so often the case in these old mysteries, may never be fully known. Thank you for watching. And if you're looking for more Well I Never, we've recently started a new audiobook channel where
Okay, so there you go. So if anybody is interested in this type of stuff, check out this man's YouTube channel. They're absolutely amazing. It's called Well I Never. Well I Never. And again, I'll put the link into the YouTube channel and on the Facebook page as well. So there you go. A woman started working in a nursing in a hospital, never medically trained, bluffed her way, got recommendations from a nursing authority to have people in her care, which helped her. Got involved with this man, basically overdosed these patients. He got off with it. She was left with everything. There was a case of giving her a bit of mercy because of her children. She didn't get it, and she was sentenced to death and died, and he got away with it. What I would like to know is whatever became of him, and what did he do after it? Did he go quiet, or what happened next? Thanks for joining me today, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I just thought I would do a wee bonus thing or something to break the week up. By the way, folks, if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't done this yet, please consider doing so. It doesn't cost a penny, and you will be notified every time a video is posted. Thanks for joining me today, folks, and I'll see you all very, very soon.